Sunlight streamed through the towering windows of Langford Tech's Seattle headquarters, casting golden reflections across the polished marble floor. I stood outside the oak door of Victor Langford's office, my pulse echoing louder than the city hum below. My name is Ethan Harper, 40 years old, husband, father, and until this morning, Chief Operating Officer of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country. Victor Langford, my father-in-law and the company's founder, had sent me a curt message through his assistant. Mr. Langford requires your presence immediately. No greeting, no explanation. Just an order. As I turned the brass handle, a wave of unease settled over me. The faint aroma of espresso and aged leather filled the air as Victor looked up from behind his mahogany desk. His posture was as rigid as his principles, meticulous, unyielding, unreadable. Sit, he said simply, without a trace of warmth. A single document lay on his desk. My name, Ethan Harper, was printed in bold at the top, his signature gleaming beneath it. I reached for it, my stomach tightening. It was a termination letter. For a moment, I thought it must be some mistake. My voice came out steadier than I felt. What is this, Victor? He pushed the paper closer. Read it carefully, he said, his tone sharp and final. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your duties at Langford Tech. The words seemed to echo in the silence between us. I stared at the document, trying to process it. There must be some misunderstanding, I managed. 18 years, I've been here since the beginning. I built. Victor cut me off, his gaze icy. You may clear your office today. Your successor has already been chosen. Successor. The word stung like a blade. I had dedicated nearly 2 decades to this company, transforming Victor's vision into a thriving empire. I had sacrificed weekends, holidays, sleep, even parts of myself. And yet, in this moment, I was disposable. A line item crossed out, without remorse. I walked out of his office in a daze, the sound of my footsteps echoing through the corridor. Inside my office, sunlight fell across the awards, the family photographs, the little souvenirs that told the story of years of effort. My hands trembled as I packed them into a box. Every framed certificate, every photograph felt like a fragment of a life being erased. Only months earlier, I had already lost something far more personal. My wife, Sophia, Victor's daughter, had handed me divorce papers. Our marriage had disintegrated quietly, like glass cracking beneath invisible pressure. Now, my career, the one anchor I had left, was gone too. I stared out at the Seattle skyline, once a symbol of achievement. Now it looked distant, foreign. It hadn't always been this way. 6 months earlier, our lives had appeared perfect. We lived in a contemporary home on Capitol Hill, marble counters, abstract art, laughter echoing down bright halls. Sophia was the company's marketing director, brilliant, confident, and admired by everyone who met her. Our children, Olivia and Noah, filled our days with joy. To the outside world, we were the ideal family, the power couple of Seattle's tech scene. But perfection is often a mask. I remembered the day I met Sophia. I was a young engineer, nervous at a tech summit, when she walked in wearing a sapphire blue dress that caught the light like water. Her confidence was magnetic. When she smiled at me after her keynote speech, it felt as if the world had paused. Our connection was instant, our love story fast and bright. When I proposed, Victor's approval came with a condition. A prenuptial agreement. It's just a precaution, he'd said. I signed it without hesitation, believing trust mattered more than paper. That was my first mistake. In the years that followed, I worked tirelessly to earn my place in the Langford world. When the company faced its first major crisis, I was there, fixing broken systems, negotiating with investors, keeping the dream alive. We rose together, and I became known as the man behind Langford Tech's success. But in Victor's eyes, I was always an outsider, the son-in-law who didn't belong to the family name. Sophia changed, too. Late nights at the office became common. She said it was work, but the distance between us grew wider. One night she came home late, the scent of unfamiliar cologne on her clothes. I asked gently, but she brushed me off. I wanted to believe her. For the children's sake, for the memory of the woman I once knew, I stayed silent. Then came the photograph. A glossy business magazine featured Sophia standing beside Marcus Vale, a rising executive at the company. Their smiles were close, their posture intimate. The caption beneath it read, "Langford Tech's dynamic duo leading the future." My colleagues avoided my eyes. Whispers followed me in the hallways. The truth I had been denying finally stood before me. When I confronted Victor, I didn't expect sympathy, but I didn't expect betrayal either. In his office, I found Sophia and Marcus laughing together. When I demanded an explanation, Victor's reply was cold and cutting. "Sophia deserves someone of her caliber. You've served your purpose, Ethan." It felt as though the air had been knocked out of me. The man I had worked for, respected, and called family had dismissed me as if I were nothing more than a tool. Days later, Sophia slid the divorce papers across the dinner table. "I'm done pretending," she said, her voice emotionless. "You and we're from different worlds." The prenuptial agreement I had signed years ago sealed my fate. She kept the house, the assets, even custody of the children. I left with a few boxes and memories that felt heavier than anything I could carry. For weeks, I drifted in a fog. Seattle, once vibrant, now suffocated me with reminders of everything I'd lost. In desperation, I drove away from the city, past the suburbs, past the highway lights, until the skyline disappeared behind me. I returned to the small town where I'd grown up, to my parents' modest farmhouse surrounded by golden fields. I hoped for comfort, for understanding. But when I told them what had happened, my father's eyes hardened. "We warned you about that life," he said bitterly. "You chose them over us. Now live with it." His words cut deeper than Victor's dismissal ever could. I had given up most of my inheritance to help them years ago, yet there was no gratitude, only resentment. That night, I sat alone in my car outside a dimly lit gas station. Rain tapped softly against the windshield. From an old box, I pulled out my grandfather's leather-bound journal, the one he'd given me before he passed. Inside, in his neat handwriting, were 3 words that had once guided me: "Stay grounded, always." Those words reignited something within me. Beneath the ashes of humiliation and heartbreak, a small flame of purpose flickered. I remembered the secret project I had quietly built over the years, my own software company, Summit Solutions. For 12 years, I had nurtured it in secret, developing tools for small and mid-sized businesses. Few knew it existed, not even the Langfords. I started it in a rented garage with an old laptop, driven by a belief that simplicity could transform industries. I'd faced countless rejections, but I had persisted. Now, as I stared into the rain, I realized that Summit wasn't just a project. It was proof that I didn't need the Langfords to define me, and for the first time in years, I smiled. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of something entirely new. The Oregon coast became my sanctuary. Each morning, I woke to the sound of seagulls calling above the misty horizon, and each night, the rhythm of the waves lulled me into a calm I had never known before. In that solitude, I began to rebuild, not my career, but my soul. 4 months, I lived simply. My cottage was small but full of warmth, the scent of pine wood, the crackle of a fire, and the soft hum of the sea outside my window. I read old journals, cooked my own meals, and rediscovered the quiet strength that comes from being unseen. The chaos of Seattle felt like a lifetime ago. I was no longer the man chasing approval. I was learning to breathe again. But life has a strange way of circling back. One chilly evening, my lawyer and closest confidant, Mia Caldwell, called unexpectedly. Her tone was cautious but intrigued. "Ethan, you might want to see this," she said. Langford Tech is collapsing. Marcus's leadership has been a disaster, and Victor's health is declining. The board's in chaos. I hadn't followed the news since leaving Seattle, but curiosity pulled me in. The reports were brutal: projects cancelled, investors fleeing, and employees resigning in waves. The empire I had helped build was falling apart. "Do you want to stay out of it?" Mia asked gently. "Or do you want to do something about it?" I hesitated. For months, I had promised myself never to return to that world. Yet as I stared at the ocean outside my window, I heard my grandfather's voice echo in memory. "A man's purpose is not destroyed by failure, it's revealed by it." That night, I decided I would return, not to seek revenge, but to reclaim what was rightfully mine. With Mia's help, I began quietly buying Langford Tech shares through hidden trusts and smaller firms. Every purchase brought me closer to control, and within 3 months, Mia called with the words that changed everything: "You own 51% of the company." I sat in silence, watching the sunset burn across the horizon. I didn't feel triumph, only resolve. The man who once begged for acceptance was gone. I would walk back into that company on my own terms. A week later, Langford Tech announced an emergency board meeting. The company was bleeding money and reputation. It was time. When I arrived at the Seattle headquarters, I felt an odd calm. The same polished floors, the same scent of espresso and leather, but the power in that place no longer belonged to them. It belonged to me. Inside the boardroom, Victor sat at the head of the table, his once steely presence diminished by exhaustion. Sophia was there too, avoiding my gaze, and Marcus leaned back in his chair with the smug grin of a man too confident to see the storm coming. Victor's eyes narrowed. "Ethan, you have no business here." I turned to Mia, who handed him a folder. "Actually," she said, her voice steady, "my client does. He's the majority shareholder of Langford Tech." The room fell silent. Marcus laughed nervously. "That's impossible." "No one could have." "It's very possible," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. "Because I did." Gasps rippled through the boardroom. The documents confirmed everything. Victor's hand trembled as he read. You betrayed us." "No," I replied. "You betrayed the company. I'm just saving what's left." The vote was swift. Victor was removed as chairman. Marcus was fired for misconduct. For the first time in years, I stood at the head of the table, not as an outsider, but as a man who had earned his place through resilience, not privilege. When the meeting ended, Sophia approached hesitantly. Her voice wavered. "Ethan, I never wanted it to end this way." I met her gaze, steady but distant. "Neither did I. But every choice has a cost." Tears welled in her eyes. "You always were stronger than me." I said nothing. Some truths didn't need words. Over the next year, I rebuilt Langford Tech with a new philosophy: integrity before image, people before profit. I listened to my employees, rewarded innovation, and created programs to support small startups that reminded me of my own beginnings. Slowly, the company began to recover. The headlines changed from Langford's collapse to the Phoenix of Seattle. But as the company flourished, I realized something profound. The world I once thought was everything no longer defined me. The wealth, the applause, the power, they all felt empty compared to the peace I'd found on the coast. When the company was strong enough to stand on its own, I called a final meeting. "It's time for new leadership," I announced. "Someone young, honest, and brave enough to dream." I appointed a talented engineer, one I'd mentored years ago, as the new CEO. That night, I packed the last of my things from my old office and watched the Seattle skyline one final time. The lights glittered like 1,000 memories, beautiful but distant. I wasn't walking away in defeat this time. I was walking away free. Months later, there was a knock at my cottage door. When I opened it, Sophia stood there, her face pale and tired. Beside her were Olivia and Noah. I came to ask one thing, she said quietly. They deserve a stable home. You've always been the steady one. Please, take them. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The pain, the years of distance, all of it dissolved when I saw my children's eyes. I knelt and gathered them into my arms. You'll always have a home with me, I whispered. Sophia nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. She left without another word, her car disappearing down the road. I watched until the dust settled, feeling both sorrow and gratitude. Life after that was beautifully simple. Mornings began with pancakes and laughter, afternoons with school projects, and evenings with stories by the fire. Olivia loved writing and filled pages with tales of heroes who rose from nothing. Noah collected shells along the beach, calling each one a treasure. Their joy became my redemption. Mia visited often, helping me start the Summit Foundation, a program to mentor young dreamers and small entrepreneurs. You turned your pain into purpose, she told me one afternoon. I smiled. It's what grandfather would have wanted. Years passed gently. Langford Tech continued to thrive under new leadership, but I remained in the background, content with simplicity. The sea had taught me what no boardroom ever could, that real success is not measured by titles or wealth, but by peace, love, and the lives we touch. Sometimes, as the sun set behind the horizon, I'd open my grandfather's worn journal. The ink had faded, but his message never did. Stay grounded, and life will rise with you. I finally understood. I had lost everything once, status, family, identity, but in losing it all, I had found myself. I discovered that forgiveness is stronger than vengeance, and that peace is more powerful than pride. I learned that we are not defined by who leaves us behind, but by who we become after they do. And as Olivia's laughter echoed through the cottage and Noah's small hand slipped into mine, I knew the truth my grandfather had lived by all his life. True fulfillment doesn't come from conquering the world, it comes from rebuilding your heart with honesty, humility, and love. As the waves whispered outside my window, I smiled, finally at peace. My story had come full circle, not the story of a man who lost everything, but of a man who found everything that truly mattered.